My name's Claire, and I'm 32. 3 years ago, I was jobless, broken, and begging my family for a lifeline. They turned their backs, leaving me to claw my way up alone. Now I'm sitting on the porch of my own house, coffee in hand, staring at a little wooden bird a neighbor gave me when I had nothing. But then my family came back, saying I don't even have a family and trying to take my home. How did I fight back? Stick around to find out. Where are you watching from? Hit like or subscribe if you've ever faced a betrayal like this. 3 years ago, I was 29, holed up in a dingy apartment in Toledo, Ohio. The kind of place where the radiator hissed all night and the walls smelled like old cigarette smoke. I'd just lost my marketing job, laid off with a polite email and a severance check that wouldn't cover next month's rent. My savings were a joke, and every job application I sent felt like shouting into a void. I was unraveling, but I thought at least I have my family. They'd always been there, right? So I picked up my phone, hands shaky, and called my older sister, Abigail. The line rang too long. When she finally answered, her voice was clipped like I was an interruption. "Claire." "I'm swamped," she said. "Work's crazy. The kids are a nightmare. What do you need?" I swallowed hard, trying to sound steady. "I got laid off, Abby. I'm kind of freaking out. Can we talk?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "Look, you'll figure it out. You always do. I gotta go." The call ended before I could say another word. I stared at the screen, my chest tight. She didn't even ask if I was okay. I told myself she was just stressed. Abigail had always been the responsible one, the sister who had her life together. 2 kids, a husband, a mortgage. Maybe she didn't mean to brush me off. I scrolled through my contacts, landing on my brother Nathan. He was younger, only 27, but we'd been close growing up. Or so I thought. I dialed, hoping for the Nathan who used to sneak me extra cookies when Mom wasn't looking. "Yo, Claire, what's up?" His voice was casual, distracted, like he was half watching TV. I forced a smile, even though he couldn't see it. "Hey, I'm in a rough spot. Lost my job. I just need someone to talk to." He laughed, sharp and mean. "Seriously? You're always a mess, Claire. What do you want me to do about it?" My stomach dropped. "Nathan, I'm not a mess. I need you guys right now." He cut me off. "Maybe stop screwing up your life and you wouldn't. I'm not your therapist." The line went dead. I sat there, phone still in my hand, the apartment's hum filling the silence. My scarf, the one Mom gave me when I was 15, was draped over the couch. It was faded, fraying at the edges, but I grabbed it anyway, wrapping it around my neck like it could hold me together. Nathan's words stung worse than Abigail's. Always a mess. Was that how they saw me? I'd made mistakes, sure. Dropped out of college for a year, bounced between jobs. But I wasn't a failure. Not yet. I tried to shake it off. They were busy, I told myself. They didn't mean it. There was still Dad, Robert. He'd always been the anchor, the one who'd sit with me after Mom died, telling stories about her to keep her alive. If anyone would listen, it'd be him. I texted, keeping it light. "Hey, Dad, can we grab coffee? Need to catch up." To my relief, he replied fast. "Sure, kiddo. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., that diner on Main." I exhaled, a spark of hope flickering. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I felt. The next morning, I walked into the diner, the bell above the door jingling. The place smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease, but it was warm, familiar. Dad was already there, hunched over a mug in a corner booth. His hair was grayer than I remembered, his flannel shirt wrinkled. I slid in across from him, smiling. "Hey, good to see you." He nodded, but his eyes didn't meet mine. "Yeah, you too." I dove in, telling him about the layoff, how I was applying for jobs, but the rejections were piling up. I admitted I was scared, that I didn't know how I'd pay rent next month. He listened, or seemed to stirring his coffee too long. Then he leaned back, folding his arms. Claire, you gotta pull yourself together. You're not a kid anymore. This struggling thing, it's getting old. His voice was flat, like he was reading a script. I blinked, caught off guard. Dad, I'm trying. It's not like I chose this. He shook his head, and that's when it came. You know, I'm not doing great either. Lost a big contract last month. I could use some help, actually. A loan, maybe. Couple grand to tide me over. My mouth went dry. Dad, I don't have anything. I'm jobless. You know that. His face hardened a look I'd never seen before. Right. So you're too broke to help your own father, but you're fine whining about your problems? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He stood tossing a few bucks on the table. You're no daughter of mine if you can't step up. He walked out the bell, jangling behind him. I sat there frozen, the diner's chatter fading to a dull roar. My hands gripped the scarf, its wool scratching my skin. No daughter of mine. The words burned, carving a hole I didn't know could hurt so bad. I wanted to cry, to run after him, but my legs wouldn't move. Instead, I stared at the table, his half-empty mug mocking me. Then I noticed her, an older woman, maybe 60, wiping down the counter. Her name tag read, Eileen. She'd been watching. I realized, her eyes soft but sharp. She walked over, sliding a fresh coffee in front of me. On the house, she said quietly. Tucked under the saucer was a folded note. I opened it, my hands trembling. In neat handwriting, it said, You're stronger than you know. I looked up, but she was already back at the counter, like nothing had happened. I clutched the note, my throat tight. Abigail's dismissal, Nathan's cruelty, Dad's betrayal, they hurt, but Eileen's small gesture felt like a lifeline. I didn't know her, but she saw me. Really saw me. I slipped the note into my pocket, paid for my coffee, and left the diner. The scarf felt heavier now, like it carried their words. I wasn't sure what came next, but something in me shifted. I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I walked out of the diner, the cold Ohio air biting my face. Eileen's note was crumpled in my pocket, but it wasn't enough to dull the ache. Dad's words kept looping in my head, sharp as a blade. No daughter of mine. I'd always thought family was supposed to catch you when you fell, but mine was shoving me deeper into the dirt. I headed home, my sneakers scuffing the cracked sidewalk, the weight of their rejection sinking in. My apartment was waiting, a dim reminder of how far I'd fallen, with its peeling paint and the neighbor's dog barking through the walls. Back inside, I dropped onto my lumpy couch, the springs creaking under me. The scarf was still around my neck, but I couldn't bring myself to take it off. It was like letting go of Mom all over again. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through old texts from Abigail and Nathan, hoping to find some trace of the siblings I used to know. There was nothing but logistics, holiday plans, reminders to call Dad. No warmth, no check-ins. Had it always been like this, and I just didn't see it? I needed to understand. Maybe I'd caught them at a bad time. Maybe if I tried harder, they'd come around. I opened my laptop, the screen's glow harsh in the dark room, and started typing an email to Abigail. I kept it simple, honest. I told her I was sorry if I'd leaned on her too much, that I was struggling, but wanted to stay connected. I asked if we could meet up, just the two of us, like when we'd sneak out to the lake as kids, and talk about nothing. I hit send, my heart pounding like I'd just confessed a crime. The reply came faster than I expected, popping up in my inbox within an hour. My hands shook as I clicked it open. Claire, I don't have time for this, it read. You're always so needy. I've got my own problems, and frankly, you're not one of them. Stop acting like we owe you something. I read it twice then, a third time, each word slicing deeper. Needy. Owe you. This wasn't my sister stressed out. This was her choosing to push me away. I closed the laptop, my throat burning. I wanted to scream to call her and demand why she thought I was some burden. Instead, I curled up on the couch, the scarf scratching my chin. Memories flooded in ones I'd buried. Like the time Abigail planned a family Christmas without inviting me, saying I'd ruin the vibe with my job troubles. Or how Nathan laughed when I cried after Mom's funeral, telling me to get over it. I'd excused it all, chalked it up to grief or stress. But now, it felt like a pattern I'd been too blind to see. I tried Nathan next, against my better judgment. Maybe he'd soften if I reached out differently. I sent a text, short and careful. "Hey, I know you're busy, but I'm going through a lot. Can we talk sometime? Miss you." I waited, staring at the screen, the dog next door still yapping. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, a reply. "Miss me? You're just fishing for pity. Grow up, Claire." I dropped the phone like it burned me. Grow up. Like I was some kid throwing a tantrum, not a woman drowning. The apartment felt smaller now, the walls closing in. I stood pacing to the kitchen, where a stack of unpaid bills sat on the counter. Rent, electric, internet, each one a reminder I was barely holding on. I'd thought family would be my lifeline, but they were cutting the rope. I opened the fridge, staring at half a carton of milk and a wilted head of lettuce, then slammed it shut. My eyes landed on a photo stuck to the door, one I hadn't looked at in years. Me, Abigail, Nathan, and Dad at a picnic back when Mom was still alive. We were smiling, arms around each other, the sun bright behind us. I ripped it down, crumpling it in my fist. That family didn't exist anymore. I sank to the floor, the tile cold against my legs. Eileen's note was still in my pocket, and I pulled it out, smoothing it flat. "You're stronger than you know." I wanted to believe her, but I didn't feel strong. I felt like a kid again, the one always left out, the one who didn't fit. Growing up, Abigail and Nathan were Dad's favorites, the ones he'd brag about at family dinners. I was the quiet one, the one who'd hide in my room with Mom's old books. After she died, I tried so hard to belong, to make them see me, but they never did. A noise snapped me out of it, the buzz of my phone on the couch. I scrambled up, hoping maybe Nathan had texted again or Abigail had reconsidered. It was Dad. My heart leapt, then sank as I read the message. "Heard you're begging Abby and Nate for attention. Stop embarrassing yourself." I meant what I said at the diner. I stared at the words, my vision blurring. Embarrassing myself. He wasn't just rejecting me. He was ashamed of me. I dropped the phone, my hands trembling. The scarf felt like it was choking me now, and I yanked it off, tossing it onto the counter. I didn't cry, though I wanted to. Instead, a quiet anger started to burn, mixing with the hurt. I wasn't embarrassing. I was trying to survive, and they were acting like I didn't matter, like I was nothing. Eileen's note caught my eye again, and I picked it up, reading it one more time. "Stronger than you know." Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't need them to save me. I stood, grabbing my coat. I needed air, needed to move. As I stepped outside, the night was quiet, the streetlights casting long shadows. I started walking, no destination in mind, just needing to feel something other than this ache. My family's words were still there, clawing at me, but something else was growing too. A spark, small but stubborn. I didn't know what I'd do next, but I knew I couldn't keep begging for their love. Not anymore. That night's walk didn't fix anything, but it cleared my head enough to keep going. Over the next year, I threw myself into survival. I landed a freelance marketing gig, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. I moved out of that miserable Toledo apartment into a better one with actual sunlight and a stove that worked. Every paycheck, I socked away, a little dreaming of a house, a real home, something no one could take from me. I was 30 now, and for the first time in forever, I felt like I was building something. But my family's silence hung over me, a shadow I couldn't shake. I kept thinking about Eileen's note tucked in my wallet like a talisman. "You're stronger than you know." It pushed me to try again with Abigail, Nathan, and Dad. Maybe they'd see I was getting back on my feet, that I wasn't the mess they thought. I wanted them to be proud to be part of this new chapter. So I sent out invites for a dinner at my place, a simple spread of pasta and wine, hoping it'd feel like old times. Abigail texted back, "Fine, I'll come." Nathan didn't reply, but I held out hope. Dad sent a vague, "Not sure, busy." I told myself it was a start. The night of the dinner, I fussed over every detail. I set the table with mismatched plates, lit a cheap candle, and even bought a bouquet of daisies for the counter. My new apartment wasn't fancy, but it was mine and I was proud of it. I wore a green sweater, one that made me feel put together, and kept checking the clock. Abigail was late. By 7:30, I was pacing the pasta, getting cold. Nathan hadn't shown and Dad hadn't texted. Finally, the doorbell rang. Abigail stood there, her coat damp from a light drizzle, her face pinched like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Traffic was a nightmare," she muttered, brushing past me. No hug, no smile. I forced a grin, ushering her in. "No worries, come eat. I made that sauce you used to like." She barely nodded, dropping her purse on the couch. We sat, and I tried to keep things light, asking about her kids, her job. But every question got a clipped answer, like I was pulling teeth. Then she started in. "This place is cute, Claire. Real fancy for someone who was crying about being broke a year ago." Her tone was sharp, like a jab disguised as a compliment. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "It's not fancy," I said, keeping my voice even. "Just worked hard for it." She smirked, sipping her wine. "Right. Worked hard while Dad's drowning in debt. You ever think about anyone but yourself?" My stomach twisted. Abby. I didn't know Dad was struggling that bad. "He never said—" "Of course he didn't," she snapped. "You're too busy playing victim to notice. You didn't even call him after that diner stunt you pulled." I blinked, stunned. Stunt I'd asked for support, not a loan. I wasn't playing anything? I said, my voice rising despite myself. "I was scared, Abby. I needed you guys." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "You needed us to fix your mess like always. Meanwhile, Dad's losing everything, and you're out here buying flowers." She flicked a daisy petal, letting it fall to the table. I gripped my napkin, my knuckles white. Her words were venom, but what hurt worse was the truth in them. Not about me, but about how she saw me. Selfish, useless. I wanted to scream that I'd been scraping by, that every dollar I earned came from sleepless nights and rejected applications. But she wasn't listening. She was rewriting me into someone I wasn't. "Abby," I said, slow and careful, "I'm trying to rebuild. I invited you here to share that, not to fight." She snorted, standing to grab her coat. "Save it! I only came to see if you'd grown up." "Guess not." She was out the door before I could respond, the candle flickering in her wake. I sat there, the apartment too quiet, the uneaten pasta congealing on the plates. My sweater felt too tight, like it was mocking my effort to seem okay. I cleared the table, moving on autopilot, and dumped the daisies in the trash. Abigail's words kept circling, each one a fresh cut. Playing victim. Selfish. I'd spent a year proving I could stand on my own, and she'd torn it down in 10 minutes. Worse, Nathan hadn't even bothered to show, and Dad's absence felt like a verdict. The next day, I got a call from my cousin Harper. We weren't close, but she'd always been kind, the one who'd slip me extra pie at family gatherings. Her voice was low, nervous. "Claire, I heard about the dinner. I'm sorry Abigail was so harsh." I sighed, leaning against my kitchen counter. "Yeah, she wasn't exactly warm. What's going on with everyone?" There was a long pause. Then Harper dropped a bomb. "It's not just Abigail. Dad's been telling the whole family you abandoned us. Said you refused to help him when he was desperate, that you're ungrateful." My heart sank. "Harper, that's not true. He asked for money I didn't have. I was jobless." "I know," she said quickly. "But he's got everyone believing it. Nathan's backing him up, saying you think you're too good for them now. They didn't invite you to the last family reunion because of it." My knees buckled, and I slid to the floor, the phone pressed to my ear. A reunion I hadn't even known. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I whispered. Harper's voice cracked. "I wanted to, but Dad said not to. He's planning something, Claire. I don't know what, but he and Abigail are talking about teaching you a lesson. I'm scared for you." I hung up my hands, shaking. The kitchen was bright sunlight streaming through the window, but I felt cold, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Dad wasn't just mad. He was turning the family against me, rewriting my story to make me the villain. Nathan was helping, and Abigail was leading the charge. I'd thought their rejection at the diner was the worst of it, but this was deeper, uglier. They weren't just ignoring me, they were erasing me. And Harper's warning that they were planning something sent a chill down my spine. What were they after? My new life, my home, my peace? I didn't know, but the betrayal was sharpening, cutting into places I didn't know could hurt. Harper's words echoed in my head, a warning I couldn't unhear. Teaching me a lesson. I stood in my kitchen, the linoleum cold under my bare feet, staring at the phone like it might explain what my family was planning. The sunlight felt wrong now, too bright for the dread pooling in my chest. I wanted to call Harper back, demand details, but her voice had been so shaky, like she was already regretting telling me. Instead, I sank into a chair, my hands gripping the table's edge, trying to make sense of a family that felt like strangers. I'd been so focused on rebuilding, on proving I wasn't the failure they thought, that I hadn't seen this coming. But the signs were there, weren't they? The way Abigail's eyes had glinted with resentment at dinner, like my small victories were an insult. Nathan's absence not even bothering to fake an excuse. And Dad spreading lies to aunts and uncles I hadn't seen in years, turning me into the family pariah. I thought about calling him, confronting him, but the memory of his diner walkout stopped me. He'd made his choice. They all had. My new boyfriend, Lucas, noticed something was off when he came over that evening. He was solid, a carpenter with hands rough from work and a laugh that usually eased my nerves. I'd met him a few months ago at a coffee shop where he'd teased me for spilling sugar on the counter. Now he stood in my living room, his tool belt still on, watching me pace. "Claire, you're wearing a hole in the floor," he said, half joking. I tried to smile, but it faltered. "It's my family," I admitted, voice low. "They're saying I abandoned them, Lucas. Dad's telling everyone I'm some selfish brat who left him to rot." Lucas frowned, setting his belt on the couch. "That's bull. You were jobless, scraping by. What were you supposed to do, magic up cash for him?" I shrugged, wrapping my arms around myself. "I don't know. Maybe I should have tried harder to help. Maybe they're right." His face hardened. "Don't do that. They're twisting this to make you the bad guy. You gotta cut them off, Claire. They're toxic." I flinched, his words hitting a nerve. Cut them off. They were my family, the only one I had left after Mom. Even now, after everything, I couldn't imagine letting go completely. "I can't just give up on them," I said. "They're not perfect, but they're mine." Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get it, but they're hurting you. You're killing yourself, trying to make them love you." His voice was gentle, but it stung, like he'd seen a truth I wasn't ready for. I turned away, pretending to adjust a stack of books on the shelf. "I just need time," I muttered. He didn't push, but the air between us felt heavier, like my refusal to let go was a wall we couldn't cross. I hated that he might be right, but I wasn't ready to admit it. The next week, the rumors got worse. I found out from an old high school friend, Jenna, who messaged me out of the blue. She'd run into Nathan at a bar, and he'd been loud drunk telling anyone who'd listen that I'd ditched the family to live my high and mighty life. Jenna's text was kind but blunt. "Claire, he made you sound awful. Said you're too good for them now that you've got this fancy apartment and don't care about anyone else." I didn't buy it, but people were listening. I read the message in bed, the glow of my phone the only light in the room. My heart pounded a mix of shame and rage. Fancy apartment. It was a one-bedroom with creaky floors and a leaky faucet. Too good for them. I'd begged for their support, and they'd slammed the door in my face. I wanted to call Nathan to scream at him for lying, but I knew he'd just laugh it off like he always did. Instead, I scrolled through my family's social media, something I'd avoided for months. Abigail had posted photos from that reunion I wasn't invited to. All smiles with Dad and Nathan, their arms around cousins I used to be close with. The caption read, "Family first. Always." I stared at it, my throat tightening. Family first except for me. I wasn't even tagged, like I didn't exist. I closed the app, but the image burned behind my eyes, proof of how easily they'd erased me. Then came the voicemail. It was from my Aunt Linda, Dad's sister, who'd always been distant but fair. I played it, expecting maybe an apology or an olive branch. Instead, her voice was cold, clipped. "Claire, I heard what you did to your father. Refusing to help when he's at rock bottom, that's low, even for you. Don't expect an invite to my house anytime soon." The message ended, and I sat on my bed, the phone slipping from my hand. Even for you. Like I was some monster they'd all agreed on. I hadn't spoken to Linda in years, but Dad's lies had reached her, twisting her against me too. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the fridge filling the quiet. Every rejection, every lie piled up like bricks, crushing me. Abigail's contempt, Nathan's cruelty, Dad's betrayal. It wasn't just personal anymore. They were waging a campaign, painting me as the villain to anyone who'd listen. And Harper's warning kept circling back that they were planning something worse. A lesson. What did that mean? Were they going to show up at my door, demand money, shame me in front of the family? Or was it something bigger, something I couldn't see coming? By morning, I was exhausted. My eyes gritty, my body heavy. I dragged myself to the bathroom, splashing water on my face, avoiding the mirror. I didn't want to see the woman they'd turned me into, the one who wasn't enough, who didn't belong. Lucas texted asking if I wanted to grab breakfast, but I didn't reply. I couldn't face his pity, or worse, his "I told you so." I pulled on a jacket and headed to the corner store, needing to move to do something normal. But as I walked, I felt eyes on me, imagined whispers from neighbors who'd heard Nathan's bar rants or Linda's judgment. I was paranoid, I knew, but it didn't feel irrational. My family was rewriting my life, and I was powerless to stop it. The worst part? Deep down, I still hoped they'd change, that they'd see me, really see me, and want me back. But with every lie, that hope was crumbling, and the pain was swallowing me whole. 2 years later, I was 32, and I'd done the impossible. I bought a house, a small, creaky fixer-upper on a quiet street in Columbus with chipped paint and a porch that sagged, but it was mine. Every nail I hammered, every wall I painted, felt like proof I wasn't the failure my family swore I was. I'd clawed my way up from that dark year freelancing until my fingers ached, saving every penny. Lucas moved in his tools, scattered in the garage, his laugh filling the rooms. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I was on a work trip in Chicago, pitching a campaign to a new client when it happened. 3 days of meetings, my phone buzzing with emails, my mind on deadlines. Lucas stayed home working on a kitchen remodel. I texted him goodnight, promising to be back Friday. The trip went well, and I caught an early flight home, eager to sleep in my own bed. I pulled into the driveway at dusk, the sky a soft purple, my suitcase rattling behind me. The house looked peaceful, the porch light glowing, but something felt off. The front door was ajar, just a crack. I pushed it open, my heart picking up speed. The living room was lit, but not by the lamps I'd chosen. A harsh floor lamp, one I'd never seen, cast shadows on the walls. Suitcases were piled in the corner, unzipped, spilling clothes. A pizza box sat open on my coffee table, grease stains smearing the wood. Voices came from the kitchen, low and familiar. My stomach churned. I stepped forward, my boots loud on the hardwood, and there they were. Abigail, Nathan, and Dad standing around my island counter like they owned the place. Abigail turned first, her hair pulled back, a glass of my wine in her hand. She didn't flinch, just smirked like she'd been waiting for me. "Well, look who's home," she said, her voice dripping with mock surprise. Nathan leaned against the counter, a beer bottle dangling from his fingers, his grin sharp. Dad sat on a stool, eyes on the floor, his hands folded tight. Lucas wasn't there, and that scared me more than anything. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the panic rising in my throat. Abigail set her glass down, slow and deliberate. "We're moving in, Claire. This house, it's ours now." My knees buckled, but I caught myself on the doorframe. "What?" I whispered the word, barely audible. She stepped closer, her heels clicking on my tile. "You heard me. You don't even have a family, Claire. You made that clear when you turned your back on us, so we're taking what's fair." Her words hit like a slap, that phrase, "you don't have a family," cutting deeper than I thought possible. It was my worst fear, the one I'd buried since Mom died, thrown in my face like a weapon. Nathan laughed low and mean. "Come on, don't act shocked. You've been living it up while Dad's sleeping in his car." "You owe us." I stared at him, my mind racing. Sleeping in his car, Dad hadn't said a word about being that desperate. I looked at him, waiting for him to speak, but he just stared at his hands, his silence louder than their accusations. "This is my house," I said, my voice shaking now. "I paid for it. You can't just walk in." Abigail's smirk widened, and she pulled a key from her pocket, dangling it like a trophy. "Oh, we didn't just walk in. We've got keys. Had the locks changed while you were gone. Nice locksmith, by the way." Took a little cash, but he didn't ask questions. My breath caught the room spinning. They'd bribed someone to break into my home to steal my safety. I glanced at the suitcases, the pizza box, the lamp. They weren't just visiting. They'd settled in like I was the intruder. "Where's Lucas?" I demanded, my voice louder now, fear for him overtaking my shock. Nathan shrugged, taking a swig of his beer. "Your boyfriend," he stormed out when we showed up. "Didn't like our housewarming party." My heart sank. Lucas gone. I needed him here, needed his strength, but I was alone with them. My family turned predators. I took a step back, my hand brushing the wall, searching for something to ground me. Abigail kept talking, her voice calm, like she was explaining the weather. "Dad's broke, Claire. Bank took his house, his business, everything. You could have helped, but you chose this." She gestured at the room, my room, with its second-hand couch and the bookshelf I'd built myself. "So we're here to balance things out. You don't get to play happy homeowner while we're suffering." I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. I didn't choose this. I was jobless Abby. I had nothing. You all shut me out. She laughed, a sound so cold it made my skin crawl. "Shut you out? You shut us out with your fancy job and your little love nest? You think you're better than us? but you're not. You're nothing without family, and you've got none." Her words were a knife twisting in my gut. I wanted to scream to tell her she was wrong, but my throat closed up, the weight of their betrayal crushing me. Dad finally looked up, his eyes red, but he didn't speak. His silence was worse than her venom, a confirmation that he'd chosen their side. I stood there, frozen, the house I'd built from my own sweat and tears slipping away. They weren't just taking my home. They were taking my worth, my place in the world. Abigail's key glinted in the light, a symbol of how far they'd gone to erase me. I didn't know what to do, didn't know how to fight this. My hands shook, my mind a blur of hurt and rage as their voices filled the room, claiming what was never theirs. Nathan set his beer down, the clink loud in the tense air, and stepped toward me, his grin fading into something harder. "You're not getting it, Claire. This isn't a discussion. We're staying, and you're out." I backed up, my shoulder hitting the wall, the plaster cool against my skin. My eyes darted to Dad, pleading for him to say something, anything, but he just rubbed his thumbs together, avoiding my gaze. Abigail crossed her arms, her stare boring into me like I was a stranger. My kitchen felt like a trap, the air thick with their contempt. Then Nathan reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded stack of papers, slapping them onto the counter. "Check this out," he said, his voice smug. "We've been busy while you were off playing career woman." I stared at the papers, my pulse hammering. "What is that?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Abigail answered, her tone clipped. "Proof you're not fit to own this place. Medical records, signed statements. You're unstable, Claire. Always have been. We're doing you a favor taking this off your hands." My mouth went dry, my legs trembling. "Unstable," I choked out. Nathan nodded, leaning closer, his breath sour with beer. "Yeah, got a doctor buddy who says you've been erratic, depressed, a risk to yourself, and a few cousins signed off saying you've been acting crazy for years. It's all legal, Claire. We're petitioning to take the house for your own good." I grabbed the papers, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped them. The top sheet had my name, a fake diagnosis, words like bipolar and delusional typed in cold black ink. Signatures. I recognized my Aunt Linda, a second cousin I barely knew, stared back at me, each one a betrayal. "You forged this," I said, my voice breaking. "You can't do this." Abigail laughed, sharp and cruel. "Forged? No, we just told the truth. You've always been a mess, Claire. Crying to us, falling apart, never holding a job. Everyone knows it. You think you're some success story now? You're a fraud." Her words were a tidal wave drowning me. I flipped through the pages, seeing more lies, a claim I'd threatened Dad, a note saying I'd squandered family money. None of it was true, but it was detailed, convincing, like they'd spent months building a case to destroy me. I looked at Dad, my last hope. "You're letting them do this?" I asked, tears spilling, now hot on my cheeks. He finally met my eyes, and for a second I saw guilt, a flicker of the father who'd once carried me on his shoulders. Then it was gone, replaced by a hard resolve. "You left us no choice," he said, his voice low. "You turned your back on me, on all of us. This house should have been ours, to keep the family together. You don't deserve it." His words were final, a door slamming shut on any love I'd thought we had. I dropped the papers, my vision blurring. The room felt too small, the walls pressing in their faces, looming. Abigail picked up the stack, tucking it neatly under her arm. "We're giving you a week to pack," she said, like she was doing me a kindness. "Be grateful we're not dragging you out tonight." Nathan smirked, grabbing another beer from my fridge, popping it open with a hiss. "Yeah, don't make this messy, Claire. You're good at running away. Just do it again." My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, hands numb. A voicemail from Sheila, my neighbor, time-stamped an hour ago. I didn't play it, but her name on the screen sparked a memory, her nosy habit of watching the street. Had she seen them break in? The thought was a faint thread of hope, but it wasn't enough to cut through the pain. My family wasn't just taking my house. They were rewriting my entire existence, calling me crazy, worthless, a nobody. Every fear I'd ever had being unlovable, being nothing, was laid bare, their voices confirming it with every word. Abigail walked to the living room, kicking off her shoes, settling onto my couch like it was her throne. "Get used to it, Claire," she called over her shoulder. "This is home now, for us." Nathan followed, sprawling out beside her, turning on my TV, the volume loud and jarring. Dad stayed in the kitchen, his silence a weight I couldn't bear. I stood there, rooted, my tears drying into a raw, burning anger. My home, my life was being stolen, and I was helpless, surrounded by their lies, their greed, their utter dismissal of who I was. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body wouldn't move, my heart too shattered to find the strength. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move, stepping back from the kitchen, away from Abigail's smugness and Nathan's taunts. The TV blared in the living room, some game show's applause mocking the chaos in my home. Dad's hunched figure at the counter burned into my vision, his silence louder than their threats. My heart was a raw wound. Their words, "You're nothing, unstable, no family," choking me. But Sheila's voicemail, still unplayed, buzzed in my mind like a lifeline. I slipped my phone from my pocket, my fingers trembling, and ducked into the hallway out of their sight. The narrow space was dark, the air cool against my flushed skin. I pressed play, keeping the volume low. Sheila's voice crackled through, urgent but hushed. "Claire, it's Sheila from next door. Saw some people at your place this morning, looked like trouble. They had a locksmith changed your locks." Lucas was yelling, then left. "I don't know what's going on, but it ain't right. Call me." The message ended, and I leaned against the wall, my breath shallow. Sheila, the busybody I'd barely spoken to, had seen it all. Her words were a spark, tiny, but enough to remind me this was my house, not theirs. I straightened, wiping my face, the tears leaving a sticky trail. Abigail's forged papers, Nathan's sneers, Dad's betrayal, they wanted me to crumble, to run like I always had. But I wasn't that Claire anymore, the one who begged for their scraps of love. I'd built this life, this home, from nothing. They didn't get to take it. My hand tightened around the phone, and I opened the call app, my thumb hovering over 911. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. Calling the police on my family felt like crossing a line I could never uncross, like admitting we were broken beyond repair. But what choice did I have? I dialed, my heart pounding so loud I thought they'd hear it from the living room. The operator's voice was calm, professional. 911, what's your emergency? I stepped farther into the hallway, cupping the phone to my ear, my voice low but steady. There's a break-in at my house. My family, they changed the locks while I was gone, moved in without permission. They're still here, refusing to leave. The words felt surreal, like I was narrating someone else's life. I gave my address, my name, and answered her questions, each one grounding me, pulling me out of the fog of hurt. As I spoke, I heard Abigail's laugh from the living room, sharp and careless, like she was hosting a party. It fueled me, that sound, turning my fear into something harder. I hung up, slipping the phone back into my pocket, and took a deep breath. The police were coming, but I needed proof, something to show this was mine. I crept to the small office off the hallway where I kept my files. The room was cramped, stuffed with a desk and boxes I hadn't unpacked. I knelt, pulling open a drawer, my hands shaking as I rifled through folders. There it was, the deed to the house, my name printed in bold, along with the mortgage papers, every payment stamped with my signature. I clutched them, the paper crinkling, a tangible reminder of what I'd earned. My eyes caught a small wooden box on the desk, one Lucas had made for me, carved with tiny stars. Inside was Eileen's note, the one she'd given me at the diner years ago. "You're stronger than you know." I hadn't looked at it in months, but now it felt like a sign, a whisper from the woman who'd seen me when no one else did. I tucked the note into my pocket, with the papers standing taller. The TV's noise grated, Nathan's voice cutting through, yelling at some contestant's bad guess. I wanted to storm in, to scream at them to get out, but I held back. The police would handle it. I needed to stay calm, to be the one in control, not the unhinged mess they'd painted me as. But doubt crept in, cold and heavy. What if the police believed their lies, those forged papers, the signatures, the story of my supposed instability? Abigail was cunning, and Nathan's charm could sway anyone. And Dad, with his quiet guilt, might play the victim, the broken father betrayed by his daughter. I pushed the thought down, focusing on the papers in my hand. This was my truth, not their twisted version. I stepped back into the hallway, my boots silent on the rug, and glanced toward the living room. Abigail was scrolling her phone. Nathan sprawled out, oblivious to the storm coming. Dad was still in the kitchen, his back to me, a stranger in my home. My chest ached, a mix of grief and fury, but something new was rising too, a fire small but growing, fueled by every year I'd fought to stand on my own. They'd underestimated me, but I wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. I stood in the hallway, the deed and mortgage papers clutched to my chest. Eileen's note, a quiet weight in my pocket. The TV's chatter grated, Nathan's laugh mixing with the canned applause. My family thought they'd won, lounging in my home like it was theirs to claim. But the police were coming, and I wasn't the broken girl they expected. I'd spent years bending to their judgment, swallowing their lies about who I was. Not anymore. I stepped back into the kitchen, my hands steady now, the fire in my chest burning brighter. Abigail glanced up from her phone, her eyes narrowing. "What are you doing, Claire? Don't start crying again. It's pathetic." Her voice was sharp, meant to cut, but I didn't flinch. I set the papers on the counter, deliberate, my gaze locked on hers. "These are mine," I said, my voice low but firm. "My name, my house. You don't get to rewrite that." Nathan snorted from the couch, not even looking up. "Give it up, Claire. You're not winning this. We've got this handled." I ignored him, turning to Dad. "Dad, look at me. This is my home. I worked for it. You know that." He shifted his jaw tight, but he didn't respond. His silence was a knife, but I didn't let it sink in. I'd begged for his love too long and done. Abigail stood, stepping between us, her arms crossed. "Don't drag him into this. You're the one who left us, Claire. You're not playing victim now." Her words stung, but they didn't break me. I held her gaze, my voice steady. "I didn't leave you. You pushed me out. All of you. And now you're stealing what I built. It's not happening." She opened her mouth to retort, but a knock at the door cut her off, sharp and authoritative. My heart leapt. The police. Abigail's face paled just for a second before she masked it with a scowl. Nathan sat up, tossing his beer bottle onto the table, the glass clinking. "Who's that?" he demanded, his bravado cracking. I didn't answer. Walking to the door, my steps deliberate. I opened it to two officers, a man and a woman, their badges glinting under the porch light. The woman, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, spoke first. "Ma'am, we got a call about a break-in. You? Claire?" I nodded, stepping aside to let them in. "Yes, that's me. They're inside. My sister, brother, and father. They changed the locks while I was gone, moved in without permission." My voice didn't waver, though my heart raced. I'd done it, drawn the line. The officers stepped into the living room, their presence shifting the air. Abigail recovered fast, her smile syrupy as she approached. "Officers, there's been a misunderstanding. Claire's our sister, and we're just helping her out. She's been unwell, you see." She gestured at the forged papers on the counter, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We're family, trying to keep things together." Nathan chimed in, standing now, his charm turned on full blast. "Yeah, Claire's always been a bit off. We're just making sure she's safe." I felt a surge of rage, but I didn't let it show. I handed the deed and mortgage papers to the male officer, my hands steady. "These prove I own this house. I bought it paid, every cent. They bribed a locksmith to get in. My neighbor saw it happen." The female officer took the papers, scanning them, her expression unreadable. Abigail's smile faltered, and she shot me a look pure venom. "You're really doing this? Claire calling cops on your own family? You're sicker than we thought." I didn't take the bait. I turned to the officers, my voice calm but unyielding. "They've been here a few hours acting like they belong. They don't. I want them out." The male officer nodded, flipping through the deed, then looked at Abigail. "Ma'am, we'll need to see your proof of residence." Abigail hesitated, then grabbed her forged papers, thrusting them forward. "Here. This shows Claire's not fit to own anything. We're protecting her." The officer took them, but his eyes flicked to me, assessing. The room was tense, the TV still blaring a surreal backdrop to the standoff. Dad finally stood, his voice rough. "Claire, you don't have to do this. We can talk, work it out." His words were hollow too late, and I shook my head, my throat tight. "You had years to talk, Dad. You chose this instead." He looked away, guilt etching my face, but I didn't let it soften me. I'd spent too long chasing his approval, and it had cost me enough. The female officer spoke, her tone firm. "We're going to need everyone to step outside while we sort this out. Ma'am, you stay here." She nodded at me, and I felt a rush of relief, small but real. Abigail's face twisted, her voice rising. "You're believing her? She's lying. She's always been a liar." The male officer held up a hand, his voice calm but stern. "Ma'am, outside now. Let's keep this civil." Nathan grabbed his jacket, muttering under his breath, his charm gone. Dad followed, his shoulders slumped, avoiding my eyes. As they filed out, the officers leading them to the porch, I stood in the living room, the papers still in the officers' hands. The house was quiet now, the TV off the air, heavy with what I'd just done. I'd called the police on my family, drawn a line I couldn't erase. My chest ached, not just for the betrayal, but for the girl I'd been, the one who'd hoped they'd change. She was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who wouldn't let them take her peace. I walked to the window, watching the red and blue lights flash across the lawn, my reflection sharp in the glass. I didn't say a word, but my eyes said enough. This was my home, and I was done running. The police lights faded into the night, their red and blue pulses lingering on my lawn like a bruise. Abigail, Nathan, and Dad were gone, escorted out by the officers, their suitcases left in a haphazard pile by the curb. The house was mine again, but it didn't feel like home. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the fridge. I stood in the living room, the deed still on the counter, my hands empty but heavy. I'd won, hadn't I? So why did I feel like I'd lost everything? I locked the door, double-checking the bolt, my fingers lingering on the new keys the police had recovered from Abigail. The locksmith's betrayal stung a stranger's greed, enabling my family's audacity, but it was done. I sank onto the couch, the cushions still warm from where Nathan had sprawled. My eyes caught the pizza box, its lid askew, a greasy slice abandoned inside. I wanted to throw it out, to erase every trace of them, but I couldn't move. My body was lead, my mind stuck on Dad's slumped shoulders as he'd walked away. Abigail's venomous glare, Nathan's muttered curses. The next morning, I called a lawyer, a woman named Patricia. I'd found online her website promising no-nonsense property disputes. My voice cracked as I explained the break-in, the forged papers, the lies about my mental state. She listened, her tone brisk but kind, and agreed to meet that afternoon. I hung up my coffee cold on the table and stared out the window. Sheila was on her porch, watering her geraniums, her eyes flicking toward my house. I owed her a thank you, but I couldn't face her yet. Not when I was still unraveling. Patricia's office was small, tucked above a bakery, the air sweet with rising dough. She was older, her hair streaked with gray, her desk cluttered with files. I handed her the deed, the mortgage papers, and Sheila's voicemail, which I'd saved. "They can't take your house," she said, her voice steady. "The deed's clear and their papers are flimsy. Forged signatures won't hold up, but we need to file a restraining order." "Claire, this isn't just a stunt, they're organized." I knotted my throat tight, her words making my head spin. Organized. The word made my family sound like criminals, not the people I'd once loved. Filing a restraining order felt like signing a death certificate for our bond. I sat in a courthouse waiting room, the chairs hard and cold, filling out forms with Patricia's guidance. Abigail and Nathan's names looked wrong in black ink like strangers. Dad's name hurt the most, a silent reminder of his betrayal. I hesitated, my pen hovering, but Patricia's steady voice pushed me forward. "You're protecting yourself," she said, her eyes kind. "This is not betrayal. That's not survival." I signed, my hand steady, but my heart splintering in my chest. The clerk stamped my papers, her face blank, and I left with a temporary order effective immediately. They couldn't come near my house or my life, not legally at least. Back at home, I found a letter in my mailbox, no stamp, just my name in my dad's shaky handwriting. I stood in the driveway, the paper trembling in my hands, torn between tearing it open and burning it to ashes. I carried it inside, setting it on the kitchen table, unopened, its presence a weight I couldn't ignore. Part of me wanted his words, his apology, his explanation. But another part, the one that had grown hard in the hallway last night, didn't trust it. I left it there, a silent challenge to my resolve, and busied myself cleaning the house. I scrubbed the counter where Nathan's beer had spilled, swept the floor, where Abigail's heels had clicked trying to reclaim the space. Lucas called that evening, his voice rough with worry. "Claire, I'm so sorry I left. I saw them there, and I lost it." "Are you okay?" I leaned against the wall, the phone cool against my ear. My voice steady despite the ache. "I'm not okay," I admitted, my voice soft, barely above a whisper. "But I handled it. Police came. They're gone. I'm getting a restraining order." He exhaled, relief and guilt tangled in the sound, his voice breaking slightly. "God, you're incredible. I should have stayed. I'm coming over." I stopped him, my tone firm but gentle. "Not tonight, Lucas. I need to be alone." He didn't argue, but I felt his hurt through the line, a quiet pain I couldn't soothe. I hung up my chest tight, wondering if I'd pushed away the one person still on my side. The next day, the fallout began to spread. My phone buzzed with texts from cousins, aunts, people I hadn't spoken to in years. "How could you call the cops on your own family?" One read from my cousin Marcus, his words sharp with judgment. "You're heartless, Claire." Another from Aunt Linda, her accusation like a slap. I didn't reply, didn't know how to respond to their venom. Their words piled up a chorus of scorn, and I turned my phone off, the silence, both a relief and a weight heavy with the realization I was alone. I went to the backyard, needing air, needing something to anchor me to reality. The grass was patchy, the flower beds half planted, a project I'd started with Lucas but left unfinished. I knelt down, pulling weeds, the dirt cool under my fingers, grounding me in the moment. Each tug felt like defiance, like I was rooting out their lies, their betrayal. But the letter on the table haunted me, its presence louder than the birds overhead, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. What did I want? Forgiveness, absolution. I didn't know if I could give it, or if I even wanted to try. My hands stilled, the weeds, forgotten my breath catching in my throat, a quiet sob threatening to escape. I'd fought for my home, but at what cost? The family I'd clung to was gone, and the victory felt hollow, my heart frozen in the wreckage of their betrayal. I sat on the back steps, the evening air cool, the sky bruised with dusk. The weeds I'd pulled lay scattered, their roots exposed, but the yard felt no cleaner. Dad's letter still sat unopened on the kitchen table, its edges curling in the humidity. I couldn't bring myself to touch it, not yet. Every time I passed it, my stomach knotted, a mix of dread and something softer, something I didn't want to name. Hope, maybe, or the ghost of it. I hated that it lingered after everything. The next morning, Harper showed up. I opened the door to find her on my porch, her hands stuffed in her jacket, her eyes red like she hadn't slept. "Claire?" She said, her voice small. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then stepped aside, letting her in. She sat at the table, her gaze flicking to Dad's letter, then away. I didn't offer coffee, didn't sit. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, waiting. The house was too quiet, the clocks tick loud in the stillness. I heard what happened. She started, her fingers twisting a loose thread on her sleeve. The police, the restraining order. Everyone's talking. I laughed, my jaw bitter. "Let me guess. I'm the monster now." Harper flinched like I'd struck her. "They're saying you betrayed them, Claire. That you kicked Dad out when he had nowhere to go." "But I know. It's not that simple." Her voice broke, and she looked down, her hands still. "I should have warned you more. I knew they were planning something awful, but I didn't think they'd go this far." I wanted to be angry, to blame her for staying quiet too long, but her guilt was raw, mirrored in the slump of her shoulders. "What did you know, Harper?" I asked, my voice low, colder than I meant. She took a breath, steadying herself. "Dad's been manipulating everyone for years, not just you. He'd lied about why, then borrowed money, guilted us when we couldn't pay. Abigail and Nathan, they bought into it, thought you were the problem because you wouldn't play along. They've been planning to take your house for months, Claire." "Months?" Her words landed like stones, heavy and final. "Months." They'd sat around tables, plotting to steal my home while I was painting walls, planting dreams. I thought of Abigail's smirk, Nathan's casual cruelty, Dad's silence. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment betrayal. It was calculated, a campaign to erase me. "Why didn't you stop them?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Harper's eyes met mine, wet and pleading. I tried. I told them it was wrong, but they shut me out too. "I'm not like you, Claire. I'm not strong enough to fight them." I turned away, staring at the sink, the faucet dripping slow and steady. "Strong enough?" Eileen's note flashed in my mind, but it felt distant now, like a promise I couldn't keep. Harper's confession shifted. Something made the betrayal sharper, more deliberate. My family hadn't just turned on me. They'd built a machine to crush me, and I'd been blind to its gears. "Thank you for telling me," I said, finally, my voice flat. "But it's done now." She nodded, standing her chair scraping the floor. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and left the door clicking shut behind her. The house felt emptier after she was gone, the walls echoing her words. I walked to the table, my eyes on Dad's letter, but I still couldn't open it. Instead, I grabbed a sponge and started cleaning again, wiping down the fridge, the shelves, anything to keep my hands moving. The restraining order was in place, the lawyer's fees draining my savings, but the house was secure. That should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Every text from relatives, every whispered rumor chipped away at me. I was safe, but I was alone, the cost of my stand piling higher than I'd expected. Lucas came by that afternoon, his truck rumbling in the driveway. He didn't knock, just walked in his boots muddy from a job site. "You didn't answer my texts," he said, his voice gentle but firm. I was folding laundry, a pile of towels on the couch, and I didn't look up. "Been busy," I said. My tone clipped. He sat across from me, his hands resting on his knees. "Claire talked to me. You're shutting down." I folded another towel, the fabric soft under my fingers. "What do you want me to say, Lucas? I called the cops on my family. They hate me. Everyone does. That's it." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back the towel, slipping to the floor. "Don't," I said sharper than I meant. His face fell, but he didn't push. "I'm here, okay, but you can't keep carrying this alone." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and he left his footsteps heavy on the porch. I sat there, the laundry forgotten, the house too big, too quiet. Harper's truth, the relatives' scorn, Dad's letter, they were a chorus singing my isolation. I'd fought for my home, but the fight had stripped me bare, leaving only a hollow ache where family used to be. I looked at the letter one last time, my fingers brushing its edge, and turned away, the weight of it too much to bear. Spring came soft that year, the air warm with new grass and blooming lilacs. I was 33 now, and my house felt different, like it was settling into itself. The backyard was my refuge, a patch of earth I'd claimed with my own hands. I knelt in the dirt, my trowel sinking into the soil, planting marigolds in neat rows. Their golden petals caught the light's small bursts of color against the gray of my thoughts. The world was quiet out here, just the rustle of leaves and a distant lawnmower, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling a weight on my chest. The restraining order had held. Abigail and Nathan stayed away, their absence a strange relief, like a bruise that stopped throbbing. Dad's letter, still unopened, was tucked in a drawer, now its power fading with each day I chose not to read it. The lawyer, Patricia, had worked fast, securing my property with airtight paperwork, though my bank account was leaner for it. The relatives' texts had slowed their anger, fizzling into silence. I'd won my home, but the victory was quiet, less a triumph than a steady reclaiming of my own space. I wiped sweat from my brow, my hands caked with dirt, and leaned back on my heels. Gardening was new for me, a hobby I'd picked up after Lucas suggested it might help. He was right. Each seed I planted felt like a promise, something I could nurture without fear of it turning on me. Lucas was at work, his carpentry jobs keeping him busy, but he'd left a thermos of iced tea on the porch, a small gesture that warmed me more than I could say. Our talks were easier now, the tension from that awful night softening into something steadier. I hadn't let him move back in yet, not because I didn't trust him, but because I needed to trust myself first. As I worked, my mind wandered to Mom. Not the scarf or the photos I'd clung to, but her laugh, bright and unfiltered, the way she'd hum while kneading dough in our old kitchen. I'd been avoiding those memories, afraid they'd pull me back to the pain of losing her. But today, they felt lighter, like a breeze I could let pass through me. I wondered what she'd think of me now, kneeling in my own dirt building, a life despite everything. I liked to think she'd smile, her eyes crinkling, and tell me to keep going. The gate creaked, and I looked up to see Eileen, her silver hair catching the sun. She carried a small basket, her steps slow but sure. "Thought you might like some company," she said, her voice warm. I stood, brushing soil from my jeans, and smiled. Always. We sat on the porch, the boards creaking under us, and she unpacked her basket, fresh muffins, still warm, wrapped in a checkered cloth. I took one, the blueberry sweetness bursting on my tongue, and felt a pang of gratitude for this woman who'd become my anchor. We talked about small things at first, the weather, her grandson's new bike. But then she leaned forward, her eyes searching mine. "You're different, Claire. Calmer. Like you found your footing." I chewed slowly, considering her words. "I don't know if it's calm," I said. "More like, I'm done fighting ghosts. They took a lot from me, but I'm not letting them take this." I gestured at the yard, the marigolds, the life I was carving out. Eileen nodded, her gaze steady. "That's strength, you know. Not the loud kind. The kind that grows quiet like roots." Her words settled in me, heavy with truth. I'd spent so long chasing my family's approval, believing their love was the measure of my worth. But out here, with dirt under my nails and Eileen's muffins in my hands, I saw it differently. I wasn't just surviving them. I was building something new, something they couldn't touch. The thought didn't erase the hurt, but it softened it, like a scar fading over time. I sipped the iced tea, the cold glass sweating in my hand, and looked at the marigolds. They were fragile, barely rooted, but they'd grow if I cared for them. Like me. The backyard was still the sun dipping low, painting the sky in pinks and golds. I breathed in slow and deep, the air clean, my heart steady. For the first time, I wasn't looking back, wasn't bracing for the next blow. I was here in my own dirt, and that was enough. The sun sank lower, the porch cooling under my bare feet, as Eileen packed up her basket. She patted my hand, her touch light but firm, and left with a promise to bring cookies next time. I stayed there, the thermos of iced tea empty now, watching the marigolds sway in the evening breeze. Their petals were delicate, but they held fast, rooted in the soil I'd tilled. I smiled, small and private, feeling a quiet pride in this patch of earth I'd made my own. Inside, I lit a single lamp, its glow soft against the walls. The house was mine again, not just in deed, but in spirit, every creak and shadow familiar. I'd started a blog a few weeks ago, late at night, when sleep wouldn't come. It was simple, just my thoughts on surviving betrayal, on finding your way when family turns to strangers. I hadn't expected anyone to read it, but comments trickled in, strangers sharing their own stories. One from a woman named Rachel stuck with me. "Your words made me see I can let go without hating them," she wrote. "Thank you for that." I read it again, sitting at my desk, the laptop's hum the only sound. Her words were a mirror showing me how far I'd come. I opened a drawer, pulling out a small notebook I'd bought on impulse at a thrift store. Its cover was worn leather, the pages yellowed but blank. I'd been writing in it, not much, just fragments of thoughts, moments I wanted to keep. Tonight, I picked up a pen, its ink smooth under my fingers, and wrote about the marigolds, about Eileen's muffins, about Rachel's comment. I wrote about Mom too, not her death, but her life, the way she'd dance in the living room to old jazz records, her skirt twirling. The words came easy, like breathing, and when I stopped, the page was full, my hand cramped but light. I closed the notebook, setting it beside the lamp, and stood to stretch. My eyes caught the window, the glass reflecting my silhouette sharper than I remembered. I wasn't the girl who'd begged for love, who'd crumpled under their lies. I was someone new, not fearless, but steady, not whole, but healing. The thought didn't erase the scars, Abigail's venom, Nathan's cruelty, Dad's silence, but it dulled their edges, made them part of a story I was still writing. I stepped outside, the night air, crisp stars pricking the sky. The neighborhood was quiet, porch lights dotting the street like beacons. I walked to the edge of the yard where I'd planted a maple sapling last week, its trunk thin but stubborn. I touched its leaves, soft and new, and thought of Lucas, who'd helped me dig the hole, his hands sure in the dirt. I thought of Harper, who'd chosen truth over loyalty, and Sheila, whose nosiness had saved me. They were my people now, not by blood, but by choice, and that was enough. I sat on the grass, the ground cool beneath me, and looked up. The stars were faint city lights, dimming their shine, but they were there steady in their places. I thought of Dad's letter still in the drawer and realized I didn't need to read it. His words, whatever they were, couldn't change what I'd built, what I was becoming. I didn't hate him or Abigail or Nathan. I didn't need to. They were part of my past, but they weren't my future. I leaned back, my hands behind my head, the grass tickling my neck. The sapling stood beside me, a quiet promise of growth. I closed my eyes, the night wrapping around me, and let myself rest. Not because the fight was over, but because I knew I could keep going. The world was still, my breath slow, and in that moment, I was enough. I'm 33. Now, sitting at my kitchen table, a mug of chamomile tea steaming in my hands. The house is quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned like a deep breath after a long climb. It's been 6 months since the night I called the police, since I stood in my own hallway and chose myself over the family that tried to break me. The walls are different now, painted a soft cream, the furniture rearranged to fit the life I'm building. It's not perfect, but it's mine, and that's more than I ever thought I'd have. I wake up early these days before the sun, slipping on sneakers to walk the neighborhood. The streets are still lined with old oaks, their leaves rustling in the morning breeze. I pass Sheila's house, her curtains always drawn, and smile, knowing she's probably already up sipping coffee and scanning the block for gossip. I don't mind her nosiness anymore. It saved me in its own way. I loop past the corner store, the clerk waving through the window, and end up at the park where I sit on a bench and watch the sky turn pink. It's a ritual, this walk away, to start the day on my terms. Work is steadier now. My freelance gigs have grown into a small business, nothing flashy, just enough to keep the bills paid and a little extra for plants or a new book. I've hired an assistant, a college kid named Maya, who's quick with numbers and makes me laugh with her bad puns. She works from my spare room, her laptop humming, sticky notes plastered everywhere. Having her around feels good, like I'm not just surviving, but creating something, a space where others can grow too. I didn't expect that, how helping someone else could make me feel stronger. Lucas and I are finding our rhythm. He's back in the house, his boots by the door, his coffee mug on the counter. We don't talk about that night much, but it's there, a quiet understanding between us. Last week, he built a bookshelf for the living room, his hands steady as he sanded the wood. I watched him leaning in the doorway and felt a warmth I hadn't known I could trust again. We're not perfect, but we're honest, and that's enough for now. He talks about the future sometimes, a bigger house, maybe kids, but I'm not rushing. I'm learning to live in the moment, to let it be enough. I've been writing more, not just the blog, but letters I never send. I sit at this table late at night, pen scratching paper, pouring out thoughts I used to keep locked away. I write to Mom, telling her about the walks, the business, the way the light hits the kitchen in the morning. I write to myself too, the younger Claire who thought love had to hurt, who thought family was a debt you paid forever. Those letters stay in a box under my bed, a record of who I was and who I'm becoming. It's not therapy, not exactly, but it's close a way to untangle the knots without breaking. Harper calls sometimes, her voice brighter now. She's moved out of our hometown, started a job at a library surrounded by books and quiet. We talk about small things, recipes, or movies, but last month she brought up Dad. "He's living with Aunt Linda?" she said, hesitant. "He asks about you, but he doesn't push." I listened, stirring my tea, and felt nothing, not anger or longing, just a calm distance. I told her I was glad he was okay, and I meant it. That surprised me, how I could wish him well without needing him in my life. Harper's part of my world, now not family by obligation, but by choice. And that feels truer than anything we had before. I look around the kitchen, the table scarred from years of use, the window letting in a sliver of moonlight. This house isn't just a place anymore. It's a testament every crack and corner proof I didn't let them win. I think about the blog, how it's grown. How people I'll never meet write to say my words help them stand a little taller. It's strange knowing my pain could light someone else's way, but it's humbling too. I sip my tea, the warmth spreading through me, and feel the weight of the past slip a little further away. The night is still, my heart steady, and I'm ready to keep going, one quiet step at a time. Last weekend, I drove to a farmer's market an hour outside town, the kind with rickety stalls and jars of homemade jam. I wandered through my basket filling with tomatoes and a loaf of crusty bread, the air thick with the scent of fresh herbs. A woman at a pottery booth caught my eye. Her hands shaping clay into a small bowl, her focus absolute. I bought it the glaze, a deep green, and set it on my counter when I got home. It holds fruit now, a quiet addition to my mornings, a reminder that beauty can come from steady hands and time. I've been thinking a lot about what makes a life. Not the big moments, not the fights, or the victories, but the small ones, the ones you string together like beads. I used to think family was the thread, the thing that held it all in place. I'd chase their approval, believing it would make me whole. But they cut that thread, and I didn't fall apart. I found new ones, stronger ones, woven from people who chose me from moments I chose myself. Eileen's laughter over coffee. Harper's shy texts about her new job. Lucas's quiet presence at the end of a long day. These are my beads,